A stone giant could hold an army at bay for years, its very walls a declaration of power. Medieval castles were not mere buildings, they were complex engines of defense and symbols of dominance that reshaped entire nations. By the end of this exploration, you will understand the 30 fortresses that fundamentally changed the course of history through their revolutionary designs. How did a castle built into a cave withstand a siege for over a year? And what was the hidden weakness in a fortress said to be unbreachable? When you think of absolute power, what shape does it take in your mind? Its soaring walls were more than stone. They were a king's challenge carved into the very cliffs of Normandy. Château Gaillard, the proud fortress of Richard the Lionheart, rose with astonishing speed, its completion in just 2 years a feat that stunned the medieval world. Richard himself boasted that its defenses were so formidable they could be held by his own grandmother. This was no idle boast, but a declaration of a new kind of warfare set in mortar and rock. The castle's genius lay in its concentric rings of defense, a revolutionary design for its time. Imagine an attacker surviving the hail of arrows from the outer wall, only to find himself trapped in a narrow, exposed space, completely open to the defenders on the even higher inner walls. There was no safe place to take cover, no angle that wasn't covered by a well-placed arrow slit. Every approach was a carefully planned challenge, but even the most brilliant designs have their limits. The castle's legendary strength was ultimately tested not just by French siege engines, but by a simple, audacious act. During the final assault in 1204, French soldiers managed to find an unexpected way in, reportedly crawling through a forgotten service passage to open the gates from within. The fall of Château Gaillard was a thunderclap across Europe, a clear signal that English dominance on the continent was fracturing. Yet in its passing, its innovations lived on. The rounded towers that deflected siege projectiles and the complex layout of its outer baileys became the new blueprint for power, copied by castle builders for generations to come. This fortress proved that a single vision could reshape the very art of defense, setting the stage for even more ambitious projects. While Château Gaillard fell to a clever trick, another fortress earned a reputation for being truly unbreachable. High in the hills of what is now Syria, Krak des Chevaliers stood as a monument to Crusader ambition. This was not just a castle, it was the beating heart of the Knights Hospitaller, a sprawling complex of faith and military might designed to project power across the entire region. Its concentric walls were a masterpiece of layered defense, a lesson learned and perfected from earlier designs. An attacker facing Krak des Chevaliers confronted a nightmare of calculated geometry. The outer wall was formidable enough, but breaching it only led to a deadly corridor known as the exposed ground, completely open to the even higher inner wall. Every gate was a trap, every passageway funneled invaders into narrow spaces where they could be targeted from all sides. The castle's storerooms and reservoirs were so vast they could sustain a garrison for years, turning any siege into a test of endurance most armies could not hope to win. Its reputation was so absolute that the legendary commander Saladin, after capturing so many other strongholds, looked upon its defenses and simply chose to march on. He recognized that the cost of a direct assault would be too great. Krak des Chevaliers represented the peak of Crusader military engineering, a fusion of sheer scale and brilliant tactical design. Yet this theme of an impregnable fortress would be taken to a new, almost unbelievable extreme in our next story, where a castle was not just built on a mountain, but carved directly into its heart. The ambition of Krak des Chevaliers was rivaled only by a fortress of an entirely different nature, built not from quarried stone but from millions of fired bricks. Malbork Castle rises from the flat Polish landscape as the largest brick castle on Earth, a sprawling administrative and military capital for the Teutonic Knights. This was the headquarters of a unique kind of power, a monastic order that combined the spiritual mission of a crusade with the practical realities of territorial governance. Malbork was not a single castle but 3 interconnected fortresses, a vast complex designed to house a garrison of thousands and withstand a prolonged siege. Its construction from brick was a stroke of logistical genius. While stone quarries were scarce in the region, clay was plentiful, allowing the knights to build and repair their stronghold with remarkable speed. Imagine the production lines, the kilns firing constantly to produce the countless bricks needed for walls that were both formidable and surprisingly resilient, capable of absorbing the impact of siege projectiles without shattering. From its high towers, sentries could survey the surrounding countryside for miles, turning the entire region into a carefully watched territory. But Malbork was more than a fortress, it was a self-sufficient city. Within its protective walls were workshops producing armor, granaries stockpiled with enough food for a large community, and a grand palace for the Grand Master that projected an aura of unshakable authority. This castle stands as a monumental example of how a religious order used architecture not just for protection, but as a lasting statement of their right to rule, blending the sacred with the martial in a way that would inspire both awe and respect across the Baltic. The sheer administrative power of Malbork finds a counterpart in a fortress built for lasting authority. Its great stone keep, known as the White Tower, rose not in a distant land but at the very heart of a newly governed city. William the Conqueror's order to build the Tower of London was a masterstroke of strategic presence, a permanent Norman garrison overlooking the developing community of London. What began as a timber structure was rapidly transformed into an unshakable stone declaration of influence. Those walls, an astonishing 15 feet thick in places, were not just for stopping armies, they were built to project an image of enduring order. This fortress was designed from its very foundations to be the ultimate symbol of control. Yet its story is one of remarkable transformation. How does a single castle become a royal palace, a state institution, and the protector of a nation's most sacred treasures all at once? The tower's evolution is the story of England itself. Monarchs expanded it, adding luxurious royal apartments and a grand chapel, yet they also built secure chambers and symbolic sites within the same walls. It became a place of contrasts, hosting lavish coronation processions while also holding notable figures like Anne Boleyn and Sir Walter Raleigh in its keeping. This dual nature is perhaps best captured by its enduring role as the guardian of the crown jewels. The security of the jewel house was paramount, for to hold the regalia was to hold the very legitimacy of the monarchy. The Tower of London proves that the most effective fortress is not merely an impenetrable shell, but a living, changing instrument of statecraft, its stones absorbing centuries of history. This concept of a fortress as a living, evolving entity reaches its most dramatic expression in a castle that quite literally defied gravity, clinging to the edge of a cliff in a feat of engineering that still baffles the mind. Caernarfon Castle's walls were a direct message carved in stone, an echo of Imperial Rome meant to dominate the Welsh landscape and spirit. King Edward I did not only want to conquer Wales, he sought to reshape its identity and replace it with his own vision. His iron ring of castles was the instrument of this change, and Caernarfon stood as its crowning achievement, a fortress designed from the beginning as a symbol of lasting and unquestioned authority. Its unique polygonal towers and the distinctive bands of colored stone were not random architectural features. They were a deliberate imitation of the mighty Theodosian walls of Constantinople, the final stronghold of the Roman Empire. Edward was laying claim to that legacy for himself, presenting the English crown as the new inheritors of imperial grandeur right at the threshold of the Welsh princes. This was a form of psychological warfare expressed through masonry. Beyond its symbolic strength, Caernarfon was a marvel of integrated defense. The castle was not a standalone structure. It was fused seamlessly with the walls of the newly founded English town settled close by. This created an extensive, layered defensive area. An attacker would first need to breach the town walls, only to find themselves in a confined, open space between those walls and the castle's own soaring defenses, an area fully commanded from above. Inside the castle, the layout of towers and gatehouses formed a sequence of tight passages, making certain that even if one barrier was overcome, any advance could be contained. Caernarfon was more than a military stronghold. It was the administrative heart of English governance in Wales, a place from which law and order were established. Its immense scale and distinct imperial style were intended to impress and overawe, a constant stone reminder of where authority resided. This combination of immense force and thoughtful messaging set a new standard for how a castle could be used to establish control over a region. Yet, this ambition to shape an entire culture through architecture invites a question. What happens when the land itself becomes your greatest challenge, and your fortress must be built not against people, but against the constant power of the sea? Its wide moat creates a perfect mirror image of its towers and crenellations, an idealized vision of knighthood and power made real in stone. Bodiam Castle in East Sussex stands as the very picture of a medieval fortress, built in the 1380s by Sir Edward Dalingrig with permission from the king to create a defended manor. Yet for all its military posturing, with gun ports designed for some of the earliest cannon, and a succession of gates that would have made any direct approach a costly endeavor, Bodiam was a carefully crafted statement. It was as much about projecting the wealth and social standing of its owner as it was about deterring unwanted attention. The castle's symmetrical layout and grand halls were designed for comfort and ceremony, a place where a lord could entertain in style while his influence was silently communicated by the formidable walls rising from the water. This balance between domestic life and strategic readiness became the hallmark of a new era in castle design, when a noble's home needed to be both a stronghold and a palace. Bodiam's romantic appearance, so beloved by artists and poets, belies its serious purpose. It was built to oversee the river crossing and the surrounding landscape, its very presence a daily reminder of the authority that governed the land. The wide moat was not just a physical barrier, it was a symbolic one, separating the ordered world of the nobility from the common land beyond. Bodiam represents the apex of English castle design, a perfect fusion of beauty and strength that would inspire generations. Yet this very perfection signals a turning point, a moment when the nature of conflict began to change, giving rise to fortresses designed for a new kind of warfare, one born from the thunder of gunpowder and the ambition of a single, determined king. Its stone walls snake along a mountain ridge like a great dragon, a silent witness to centuries of shifting faith and power. The castle of the Moors, perched high in the mystical Sintra Mountains of Portugal, was more than a fortress. It was a vital nerve center in the long and complex story of the Iberian Peninsula. Established by early communities in the 8th century, its location was a masterclass in strategic thinking. The builders did not fight the mountain, they embraced it, allowing the long, winding defensive walls to follow the natural, jagged contours of the granite peaks. This created a defensive line that was as much a part of the landscape as the cliffs themselves, presenting any approaching force with a formidable natural barrier. This was defense by geography, turning the land itself into an impassable shield. For hundreds of years, the castle was a key stronghold, its possession a clear indicator of who held sway over the region. Its high vantage point offered unobstructed views of the Atlantic coast and the vital land routes leading to Lisbon, making it a prize of immense strategic value. The castle changed hands multiple times throughout the long period known as the Reconquista, a series of campaigns where kingdoms sought to reclaim territory. Each shift in control was a small echo of the larger cultural and political currents reshaping the peninsula. The final transition of the castle in the 12th century marked a significant moment in the consolidation of Portuguese national identity. The Castle of the Moors stands as a powerful lesson in how the most brilliant defensive designs work in harmony with their environment, a principle that would be tested to its absolute limit in our next story, where a fortress was built not just on a mountain, but within a mountain's very heart. Its unbroken skyline is a testament to 6 centuries of unchallenged authority. Hohensalzburg Fortress does not simply sit upon its mountain. It is the mountain, a sprawling stone crown overlooking the city of Salzburg. From its beginnings in the 11th century, this was the seat of the Prince Archbishops, men who wielded both spiritual and earthly power, and their fortress was designed to project that dual authority for all to see. Its continuous expansion created a labyrinth of walls and towers so advanced that no army ever dared a full-scale assault. The very idea was futile. The fortress was a masterclass in passive defense, where its greatest strength was the sheer psychological weight of its presence. A challenge was less likely to start when its leaders had to wake every morning under the gaze of those impassive walls. This was control through imposing presence perfected in stone. Its elevated position, more than 1,000 feet above the city, served as the ultimate early warning system. A single watchman could spot movement on the horizon hours before any concern reached the city gates, giving the garrison ample time to secure itself from the world below. Inside, the fortress was a self-contained world with deep cisterns, vast storerooms, and even a magnificent golden hall for courtly life, ensuring that the rulers could endure a long wait in comfort while the population remained calm. Hohensalzburg was more than a stronghold. It was a statement of perpetual readiness, a guarantee that the established order would not be shaken. This concept of a fortress as an enduring, unchanging guardian leads us to consider a very different kind of stronghold, one defined not by its connection to a city, but by its profound and deliberate isolation. A fortress that appears to float on the sea, Mont Saint-Michel rises from the vast tidal flats of Normandy like a vision. This is not merely a castle, but a breathtaking fusion of sacred abbey and unyielding stronghold, its stone walls and spires crowning a rocky island that the ocean claims twice each day. Its primary defense was not built by human hands, but by the moon itself. The relentless tidal surge created a natural moat of incredible power, transforming the approach into a challenging landscape at low tide and a raging channel at high tide. Any force attempting an advance would have to race against the water, a difficult gamble with the very elements. This environmental mastery guided visitors toward a single, heavily fortified access point, a narrow causeway that directed movement into carefully monitored passages perfectly covered by the guardians above. During the long period of the 100 Years' War, this defensive synergy was put to the ultimate test. The Mont became a bastion of French resistance, holding firm through many challenges and emerging as an enduring symbol of national identity. Its strength came from more than its walls, it came from its complete self-sufficiency. The community within operated as a small, independent city, with its own governance, protective forces, and deep reservoirs of supplies, allowing it to endure isolation for months. The genius of Mont Saint-Michel lies in this perfect harmony, a fortress that did not conquer its environment, but invited the sea itself to stand guard. This profound relationship between architecture and the natural world would be taken to an even more dramatic extreme, where a castle was not just protected by a mountain, but was carved directly into its living rock. Edinburgh Castle is an eruption of stone from the city below, a fortress that is the very heart of Scottish sovereignty. This is not a castle that simply occupies a hill. It is a castle that is the hill, built upon the ancient volcanic rock that has made it a natural stronghold for over 1,000 years. Its story is the story of Scotland itself, a continuous cycle of challenge, capture, and reclamation that forged a nation's identity. Control of this rock meant control of the kingdom, a fact understood by every monarch and general who sought to hold it. The castle changed hands between Scottish and English forces numerous times, each shift in power a significant chapter in a long journey toward independence. These were not merely military exchanges, they were contests for the spirit of a people fought on a stage of stone. Within its secure chambers, the castle safeguards the most powerful symbols of that identity, the honors of Scotland, which include the crown, scepter, and sword of state. Alongside them rests the Stone of Destiny, the ancient coronation stone upon which Scottish kings were inaugurated for centuries. To hold these objects was to hold the legitimacy of the monarchy itself, and the castle's primary duty was to ensure they remained protected. Yet Edinburgh was far more than a fortified vault. Its great hall, with its magnificent hammerbeam roof, hosted the pageantry of court, while the royal palace within the walls provided a residence fit for a king. This duality of splendid ceremony and steadfast readiness is etched into every stone. The castle's enduring presence, overlooking the modern city, is a constant reminder that some fortresses are so intertwined with a people's history that they become living symbols of resilience. This deep connection between a stronghold and national spirit finds a powerful echo in a fortress that became the last stand of an empire. Its broken silhouette stretches across the hilltop like a stone city, a colossal footprint of power visible for miles in every direction. Spiš Castle was not merely a fortress, it was an entire administrative world built atop a mountain, one of the largest castle complexes ever to rise in Central Europe. For the Kingdom of Hungary, this was the vital nerve center controlling the flow of wealth and armies along the critical trade routes connecting northern and southern Europe. Whoever held Spiš Castle held the key to the region, a fact understood by kings and challengers alike. The castle's sprawling design is a history book written in stone, its walls revealing centuries of adaptation. It began with a sturdy Romanesque keep, a solid core for protection. As challenges evolved, so did the fortress, with Gothic halls and fortifications added to strengthen its presence on the mountain. Later, Renaissance touches were woven in, reflecting a shift toward comfort and grandeur without ever sacrificing its primary, formidable purpose. This was not a single vision frozen in time, but a living entity that grew and changed to meet the demands of each new era. Its greatest test came with the Mongol advances of the 13th century, a period of profound change that swept across the continent. While many settlements faced difficulty, Spiš Castle, with its immense size and elevated position, became a symbol of resilience. Its sprawling courtyards and vast inner buildings could support a community large enough to endure a prolonged challenge. turning the mountain into a powerful center of continuity. This capacity to project influence over such a vast area set a new standard for regional identity. The sheer scale of its legacy makes us wonder what happens when a fortress is designed not just to oversee a region, but to become the very soul of a nation's story. Its brilliant white form rises like a bird taking flight, a vision of elegance that conceals a warrior's heart. Himeji Castle, known as the White Heron for its stunning appearance, stands as the ultimate expression of Japanese military architecture. This was a fortress designed not just to withstand an assault, but to orchestrate it, turning its very grounds into a masterfully arranged puzzle of confusion and control. Built during the turbulent Sengoku period, a long era of internal conflict, its primary purpose was to survive in a world where shifting allegiances were a constant possibility. The castle's genius is revealed not in a single towering keep, but in its complex, multi-layered approach to defense. The path to the main tower is a winding maze of courtyards and gates, each turn carefully calculated to disorient and slow down any approaching force. An army would find itself channeled into narrow, spiraling routes, their movements broken up and exposed from every angle. This was a three-dimensional trap where the architecture itself became a tool of strategy. Defenders utilized carefully placed openings in the walls, allowing archers to observe and respond from complete cover, while platforms built out over the passages enabled soldiers to drop heavy stones directly onto those moving through the spaces below. Every gate was a carefully planned checkpoint, forcing visitors to move in single file under the watchful eyes of the garrison. The castle's iconic white plaster was not merely an aesthetic choice, it also served as a practical fire retardant, adding another layer of protection in an age of flame-based attacks. Perhaps the most remarkable chapter in Himeji's long story came during the conflicts of the 20th century, when the surrounding city experienced significant change, yet the castle itself remained almost untouched, a pristine survivor standing amid a transformed landscape. This enduring legacy offers a powerful insight into a different philosophy of fortification, one that values subtle deception as much as sheer, imposing strength. The White Heron did not simply defy its challengers, it outthought them, proving that the most beautiful fortress could also be the most cunning. The Alhambra's red walls glow like embers against the Spanish sky, a palace fortress that mastered the art of dual identity. While its courtyards whisper with the sound of water in serene gardens, its outer ramparts and robust towers tell a different story, one of lasting presence. This was the final seat of power for the Nasrid dynasty in Al-Andalus, a concluding chapter of influence that endured for more than 250 years. Perched on the Sabika Hill, its location was a strategic masterstroke, giving its sentinels an unbroken view of the Vega of Granada and any movement in the distance. The heart of its military readiness was the Alcazaba, a strongly fortified citadel standing watch at the westernmost point. Here, a dedicated garrison lived in a state of constant vigilance, their watchtowers scanning the horizon for any sign of change. Yet the true genius of the Alhambra was how seamlessly it wove this protective strength with breathtaking artistry. The rulers did not see a contradiction between power and beauty, they saw them as two essential parts of the same vision. Passing through a simple, defensive gate, a visitor would suddenly find themselves in the Court of the Myrtles, where the sky is perfectly reflected in a long, placid pool, or the Hall of the Ambassadors, with its celestial dome of cedar wood representing the seven heavens. This was cultural expression of the most refined kind, a display of such artistic and intellectual sophistication that it spoke of a civilization not merely holding ground but flourishing. The intricate stucco work, the delicate columns, and the clever hydraulic engineering that fed fountains and baths were all declarations of a sophisticated and enduring order. The year 1492 marked a profound turning point, not just for the fortress but for the world. The transition of Granada and the Alhambra to the forces of the kingdoms of Castile and Aragon concluded a long period of cultural and political evolution on the Iberian Peninsula. This moment closed one significant chapter and immediately opened another, setting the stage for new voyages and encounters across the globe. The Alhambra remains a powerful lesson in how a fortress can be more than a stronghold. It can be a living canvas for a culture's highest aspirations, proving that the most lasting form of influence often lies not in fear but in inspired respect. This delicate interplay of strength and splendor makes us wonder, how would these principles of integrated design translate when a fortress had to defend not against armies, but against the relentless, powerful force of the sea itself? Its silhouette is a forest of pointed towers rising from the plains, a vision of the medieval world so complete it feels almost unreal. Carcassonne is not merely a castle, it is an entire city encased in stone, a double-walled labyrinth of defense that stands as the largest fortified citadel in Europe. Its two concentric rings of walls, punctuated by 52 formidable towers, created a defensive puzzle that few armies would ever dare to challenge directly. An attacker moving past the outer wall would find themselves in a carefully designed space, exposed to defensive measures from the even higher inner wall, with no clear path forward or back. This design was the pinnacle of communal security, a system that protected not just a noble family but an entire urban population. Carcassonne's immense strategic value came from its location, straddling the vital land route between the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. Whoever held this citadel controlled the flow of trade and the movement of armies across southern France, a prize that drew the focus of powers and popes. During the Albigensian Crusade, a complex period of religious and political change, the city became a key objective, its capture and recapture echoing the larger struggle for the soul of the region. The city's resilience was legendary. Its wide ramparts allowed defenders to move troops swiftly to any point of threat, while its internal streets and hidden passages ensured that supplies and messengers could circulate even when the outer world was hostile. It was a living, breathing entity designed to endure, a hub of power that could outlast any storm. What we see today, however, is a story of revival as much as survival. In the 19th century, the architect Eugène Viollet-le-Duc undertook a massive and meticulous restoration, rescuing the city from decline and returning it to its imagined medieval splendor. This ambitious project gives us a near-perfect window into the scale and vision of large-scale medieval defense, a restored giant that continues to teach us about the power of collective security. Carcassonne represents the ultimate expression of a community wrapping itself in stone, a theme of unified defense that would be tested in fortresses built for solitude, not society. Predjama Castle clings to the cliff face not as a structure, but as an extension of the rock itself, a fortress that is half stonework and half cavern. This Slovenian stronghold took the principle of environmental defense to its absolute limit, using the mountain not as a foundation, but as its primary wall. Its legendary defender, the knight Erasm Luja, turned this geological quirk into an unbreakable strategy during a famous siege in the 15th century. While enemy forces camped below, confident they could starve him out, Erasm and his men lived comfortably within the cave system that extended deep into the mountain behind the castle. How do you defeat a foe who can simply vanish into the landscape? The castle's secret was a network of natural passages and a single, hidden tunnel that led out to a distant valley. Through this secret route, supplies flowed in freely, allowing the garrison to enjoy fresh food, even cherries delivered as a taunting gift to the besiegers below. The attackers were left baffled, watching a fortress that seemed to sustain itself by magic. Any direct assault was a futile endeavor. The castle's entrance was a narrow passageway shielded by the overhanging cave mouth, forcing any approach into a tight, easily defended space where a few men could hold off an army. Predjama stands as a brilliant lesson in asymmetrical warfare, where a clever understanding of the land defeated overwhelming numbers and conventional tactics. The story of Erasm, woven with threads of rebellion and local myth, reminds us that the most powerful fortress is sometimes not the one with the thickest walls, but the one that knows its terrain as an ally. This perfect fusion of natural advantage and human cunning creates a legacy far more enduring than any man-made rampart, inviting us to look closer at other fortresses where the landscape itself was the ultimate weapon. Beaumaris Castle rises from the flat Welsh shoreline with a geometric perfection that feels almost mathematical. This is the final, flawless word in the language of concentric castle design, a project where money and ambition were no object for King Edward I. His master mason, James of St. George, poured all his accumulated genius into this flat site on the island of Anglesey, creating a fortress where every line of sight and angle of approach was considered in advance. The result was a near-symmetrical system of defense, an inner ward and an outer ward, each with their own high walls and formidable towers, all encircled by a wide, water-filled moat. An attacker would have to cross the moat, scale the outer wall, and then find themselves in a narrow outer space, completely exposed to defenders positioned on the even higher inner wall on all sides. There was no safe angle, no blind spot to exploit. The castle's gates were masterpieces of defensive planning in themselves, each a complex arrangement of multiple barriers and protected passages, forcing any approach into a slow, controlled funnel. Yet for all its technical perfection, Beaumaris carries a certain irony. The sheer cost and effort of its construction meant it was never fully finished to its original grand plan. The highest inner towers were never raised to their intended height, leaving this perfect machine of war in a state of magnificent incompletion. It stands as a breathtaking monument to an idea, the ultimate expression of medieval military architecture achieved just as the world was beginning to change. The very principles that made it so formidable, its high stone walls designed to withstand older methods of assault, were about to be challenged by the low, relentless thunder of cannon fire. This pinnacle of defensive thought invites a question: how do you build a fortress when the walls themselves can no longer be trusted to stand? Stone walls rose in the very heart of commerce, a fortress of authority watching over the bustling markets of Ghent. The castle of the Counts stood as the seat of the Counts of Flanders, its central keep a clear, physical declaration of who governed one of the richest cities in medieval Europe. This was an urban stronghold, a different kind of power play where the symbols of martial control were embedded directly within the thriving engine of trade and guild influence. The castle's high, thick walls were not just for defense against external armies. They were a daily reminder to the wealthy merchants and powerful craftsmen that their commercial freedoms existed under the watchful eye of the Count. Its presence created a constant, silent dialogue between wealth and authority, between the economic vitality of the city and the enduring power of the nobility. Within these walls, the castle functioned as a complete center of administration and justice. This was where law was enacted, where disputes were settled, and where the Count's officials managed the complex affairs of the region. The castle's secure chambers held individuals from all levels of society, a reflection of its role as the ultimate arbiter of order in a vibrant and sometimes restless urban center. This fortress did not stand apart from the city. It was woven into its fabric, proving that true dominance in the medieval world required controlling not just the land, but the very pulse of economic life. How do you maintain authority in a city whose wealth could challenge your own? The castle of the counts answered with stone and presence, a model where the seat of power was also the heart of justice, ensuring that commerce and control forever walked the same streets. This intricate dance between a stronghold and the city it governed reveals a fascinating evolution, one where the fortress itself would eventually transform from a symbol of control into a monument of shared heritage. Dunnottar Castle clings to the edge of Scotland, a fortress carved by wind and sea. This isolated headland, surrounded on three sides by the churning North Sea, presented a natural defense so formidable that its very geography was a shield. A single, narrow strip of land connected it to the mainland, a precarious bridge that turned every approach into a potential trap. This was not a castle built to be beautiful, but to endure, its stone bones fused with the cliffs in a posture of permanent defiance. Its most legendary role came during the 17th century, when Oliver Cromwell's forces marched across Britain. The Scottish crown jewels, the ancient symbols of the nation's sovereignty, were smuggled to this remote stronghold for protection. As Cromwell's troops laid siege, a local minister's wife devised a daring plan. She was permitted to visit the castle and, according to the story, left with the precious regalia hidden within bundles of flax, deceiving the watchful army and securing the jewels for Scotland's future. This single act turned Dunnottar into a guardian of national identity. Yet the castle's history also holds a more complex chapter. In its final major trial, a later siege led to the confinement of a large group of individuals within its walls. The conditions in the dungeon, a dark and cramped space known as the Whig's Vault, resulted in significant hardship for those held there. This period is remembered as a somber part of the castle's long story, a testament to the difficult realities of conflict that such strongholds were built to withstand. Beyond these pivotal moments, Dunnottar's strategic value was immense. Its high vantage point served as an early warning system for any fleet approaching the coast, while its presence allowed its owners to monitor and control the vital maritime trade routes of the North Sea. The castle's enduring, rugged image, standing alone against the elements, has come to embody the fierce and independent spirit of Scotland itself. This quality of defiant solitude finds a powerful echo in our next fortress, a stronghold that carried the weight of an entire empire on its shoulders. Its fairy-tale silhouette rises from the deep woods, a cluster of towers and turrets that seems woven from a storybook. Yet Elt's Castle is no mere fantasy. It is a stone chronicle of a single family's unbroken line, a fortress that has never fallen to an enemy in over 850 years. While other strongholds were transformed by conflict or reshaped into palaces, Elt's endured through a unique pact of shared inheritance. The castle was not the home of one lord, but of multiple branches of the Elt's family, each building their own fortified living quarters within the communal rock. This created a vertical village of relatives, all bound together by kinship and a shared interest in their collective security. The castle's location was its first and greatest shield. Perched on a steep, rocky outcrop high above the Elsbach River, it was surrounded on three sides by the water, a natural barrier that forced any approach along a single, narrow ridge. This path was completely covered by the castle's high walls and defensive positions, turning the final advance into a formidable challenge. How do you conquer a fortress where every resident has a personal stake in its survival? The answer for centuries was that you did not even try. Its remote position in the Moselle Valley kept it away from the main paths of marching armies, while its reputation for strength made it an unappealing target. The castle's design is a puzzle of interconnected buildings with shared courtyards and private family wings, all rising organically from the rock itself. There was no master plan, only a continuous process of adaptation and addition, each generation leaving its mark without compromising the whole. This was a different kind of power, one built not on conquest but on continuity. The sheer longevity of the Eltz family's ownership is a quiet testament to resilience, a story of how deep roots and a shared purpose can create a legacy more enduring than any single battle. It stands as a living bridge to the medieval world, not as a ruin, but as a home that has whispered with the same family stories for 33 generations. This profound connection between a fortress and its lineage makes us wonder what happens when the very definition of defense is turned upside down, and a castle is built not to withstand a siege, but to launch one. Its foundations are not merely stone, but the accumulated layers of 5,000 years of human ambition. The Citadel of Aleppo rises from the Syrian landscape atop a colossal, man-made hill, a tell composed of the remnants and rebuildings of countless civilizations. This is not a castle built in a single lifetime, but a mountain of history, each era leaving its mark upon the summit. The great medieval walls and towers we see today are just the most recent skin on a living chronicle of power. For millennia, this high ground was the ultimate prize, its possession signaling control over one of the planet's oldest continuously inhabited cities and the legendary terminus of the Silk Road. Imagine the caravans arriving from the east, their camels laden with spices, silks, and gems, all funneling directly toward the markets lying in the shadow of this fortress. The Citadel did not just watch over this wealth, it was the vault that guaranteed it. This immense economic prize made the fortress a magnet for every expanding empire, from the Byzantines and Crusaders to the Ayyubids and Mamluks, each layering new defenses upon the old. To approach the Citadel was to face a masterpiece of Islamic military engineering. A deep, stone-lined moat isolated the Great Mound, while the entrance was a heavily fortified bridge leading to a colossal, iron-studded gatehouse. This gate was not a simple door, but a complex, zigzagging passage designed to break up any attacking force, forcing them into narrow, exposed corridors where defenders could respond from openings above. The entire approach was a carefully orchestrated gauntlet where the architecture itself did the fighting. Yet within these formidable walls lay a surprising world of refinement. The Citadel was a city within a city, containing luxurious palaces with grand courtyards, a magnificent mosque, traditional bathhouses, and vast underground storerooms. This blend of immense defensive power and sophisticated urban living demonstrates a profound understanding of dominion. True control was not just about repelling armies, it was about fostering a center of culture, faith, and commerce that could endure through the centuries. The Citadel of Aleppo stands as a powerful lesson in the deep roots of fortified power, a place where history itself became the strongest foundation. This ancient legacy of layered strength makes us consider a fortress that faced a very different kind of challenge, one born not from ancient trade routes, but from the thunder of a new kind of warfare. Conwy Castle's 8 great towers rise from the Welsh coast like a clenched fist of stone. Built at the same time as Caernarfon, this fortress was another crucial link in King Edward I's Iron Ring, a chain of strongholds designed not just to challenge the Welsh princes, but to reshape their cultural landscape. Its design is a masterclass in pure, unadorned military presence. Those 8 massive drum towers and the connecting curtain walls form one of the most complete and impressive medieval fortresses surviving in all of Europe. But its true genius was how it functioned as part of a larger system. Conwy Castle was seamlessly fused with a robust stone wall that encircled the entire adjacent town, a newly established English settlement. This created a unified defensive enclosure, a world within walls that established a clear separation between communities. The local Welsh population was not permitted to live within this protected English borough, a policy that turned architecture into a tool of cultural division. The castle's location was a strategic masterstroke, positioned on a rocky ridge overlooking the Conwy estuary. This meant that even if the land routes were completely cut off, the castle could be reinforced and resupplied indefinitely by sea, making a successful siege nearly impossible. Every day, the people of the surrounding lands would look up at those immense, unassailable walls, a constant physical reminder of where authority resided and who was included within its shelter. Conwy was a symbol of influence as much as of war, its presence a daily lesson in the new order. This deliberate use of architecture to establish a different social structure makes us question, what is the ultimate purpose of a fortress if not to shape the perspective of those who live in its gaze? A star of stone rose where no European fortress had ever stood before. The Castle of Good Hope, built by the Dutch East India Company at the southern tip of Africa, was a declaration of power carved in an unfamiliar landscape. This was not a castle to oversee a feudal countryside, but to command the world's most vital sea lane, the gateway to the riches of the East Indies. Its distinctive five-pointed bastion design was a complete departure from the high, vertical walls of medieval keeps. This was a fortress built for a new age of warfare, where the greatest challenge came not from ladders and rams, but from the low, horizontal thunder of cannon fire. Each protruding bastion was like a spearhead, designed to give defending gunners a clear line of sight along every inch of the fortress walls, eliminating any blind spots where opposing forces could gather. The wide, sloping walls were engineered to absorb and deflect cannonballs, a stark contrast to the sheer cliffs of stone that defined an earlier era. How do you protect a global trading empire? You build a stronghold at its most critical choke point. The Castle of Good Hope became that stronghold, securing the Dutch East India Company's ships as they rounded the Cape of Good Hope, a place of rest and resupply in a long, arduous journey. Its cannons faced both the sea and the land, a quiet statement to any European rival or local group that might question its presence. For centuries, it served as the unwavering administrative and military heart of the growing Cape Colony. Within its secure walls, governors made decisions that shaped a new society. Soldiers stood watch over a distant outpost, and the vast ledgers of a maritime empire were carefully maintained. This fortress stands as a powerful lesson in architectural adaptation, proving that the principles of defense could travel across oceans, evolving to meet new challenges in a world suddenly grown much larger. The star-shaped fortress was a seed of European design planted in southern soil, and its enduring presence makes us wonder how a castle could become not just a guardian of trade, but the very cradle of an empire's lasting legacy. Pierrefonds Castle stands as a perfect dream of the Middle Ages, rebuilt from ruins to serve the ambitions of a new emperor. In the 19th century, Napoleon III commissioned the architect Eugène Viollet-le-Duc to transform the crumbling site into an imperial residence, a symbol of French power reaching back to claim a chivalric past. This was not an act of mere restoration, but a profound reimagining. Viollet-le-Duc approached his task with the mind of both a historian and a storyteller. He studied the original foundations and layouts with scholarly care, ensuring the castle's structure felt true to its era. Yet he also allowed himself creative license, adding soaring spires, intricate sculptures, and grand halls that amplified the romantic ideal of knighthood and courtly life. The result is a fortress that feels more medieval than the originals, a seamless blend of historical fact and national fantasy. Every stone was laid to tell a story, connecting the Second French Empire to a perceived age of glory and order. Pierrefonds became a stage for imperial pageantry, its very existence a declaration that the spirit of the castle could be revived to legitimize modern rule. This grand project demonstrates a pivotal shift, where the fortress was no longer a practical instrument of war, but a powerful cultural symbol. Its romantic silhouette asks us a compelling question: when does a castle stop being a defense and start becoming a dream? This reclamation of the past through architecture reveals how these structures continuously shape our understanding of power, legacy, and identity long after their original purpose has faded. A fortress of a new era rises from the sea itself. Suomenlinna, the castle of Finland, was not built upon a solitary rock but sprawled across 6 separate islands guarding the approach to Helsinki. Constructed in the mid-18th century by Sweden, this was a direct response to a clear and present challenge: the expanding naval ambition of Imperial Russia. Its purpose to project state power and control a vital waterway was a timeless strategic goal, but its execution marked a complete departure from the world of stone keeps and arrow slits. This was defense reimagined for the age of sail and cannon. The entire complex was a web of low, thick bastions and interconnected ramparts, designed not to tower over an approaching force but to withstand them. The high, vertical walls of medieval castles had become vulnerable against the steady pounding of naval artillery. Suomenlinna's architects embraced a different principle, creating sprawling, earthen banks that could absorb the impact of heavy shot without shattering. Its gun emplacements were positioned to create a layered field of fire across the narrow sea channels, turning the approach to the harbor into a carefully controlled zone where any vessel would face engagement from multiple directions at once. How do you stop a fleet? You build a fortress that is an island, or rather, a chain of islands working in perfect, coordinated concert. This was not a single stronghold but a distributed defensive system, a concept that would define military architecture for centuries to come. The fortress represented the ultimate adaptation of defensive thought, proving that the principles of control and influence could evolve from the personal stronghold of a knight to the national project of a kingdom. Its presence was a declaration that the sea, once a protective barrier, was now a field of engagement. This profound shift from the vertical to the horizontal, from the personal fortress to the state-owned citadel, forces us to ask what comes next when the very ground a fortress is built upon is no longer solid, but flows with the tide. Malbork's true power was not measured by its walls alone, but by the reach of the decrees issued from within them. This fortress was the capital of a sovereign theocracy, a state governed by monks who were also warriors, and the Grand Master ruled his vast Baltic territories with an authority that rivaled kings. From his palace here, he directed a spiritual and military campaign that carved out a new Christian realm on the frontiers of Europe. The castle's immense treasury, fed by control over the amber trade and vast land holdings, financed not just the building itself but entire armies. This wealth enabled the order to launch repeated campaigns, projecting their influence deep into Lithuania and Poland, actions that fundamentally shaped the political landscape for centuries. Within these walls, the lines between prayer and policy were seamlessly blurred. The great refectory, where the brothers took their meals in silence, was also a hall for strategic planning. The chapter house, a space for spiritual reflection and the election of leaders, simultaneously functioned as a chamber of high governance. Every decision, from the movement of troops to the allocation of funds, was framed within the order's religious mission, creating a unique fusion of faith and force. Malbork was the central node in a vast network of subordinate castles, each one a local echo of its command center's authority. This was the ultimate expression of a castle as the heart of a state within a state, a self-contained entity that minted its own coinage, enacted its own laws, and waged its own wars. How does a fortress begin to govern the very land it was built to conquer? Malbork provides the answer, demonstrating that the most enduring dominance is not just enforced by garrisons, but administered from a throne room. This vision of a castle as a complete seat of government invites a fascinating comparison with a fortress that served a very different kind of empire, one built on trade and sea power rather than faith and conquest. Its stone walls embrace two distinct worlds, one of solemn purpose and another of graceful living. The castle of the Dukes of Brittany in Nantes presents a fascinating architectural dialogue, where the stern, military bulk of the 15th century stands beside the ornate, luminous facades of the 18th. Here, the evolution of power is written in stone and window glass. The original fortress, with its deep ditches and formidable Tour du Via donjon, was built to endure a siege, a clear statement of strength from the Dukes of Brittany. Yet, as the medieval period waned, a new vision took hold. The later residential palace, commissioned by Duchess Anne of Brittany and completed by her daughter, featured expansive windows, delicate carvings, and elegant loggias designed not for repelling armies, but for welcoming a sophisticated court. This was a deliberate shift from the fortress to the palace, signaling that influence was now won in gilded halls as much as on the battlefield. How does a castle built for conflict learn the language of peace? It adapts, layering beauty over its martial foundations. The spacious courtyards and grand ceremonial rooms became stages for political theater, where alliances were formed through marriage and diplomacy, and the display of wealth and culture became a tool in its own right. Yet, for all its Renaissance elegance, the castle never fully shed its protective past. The massive ramparts and water-filled moats remained, a constant reminder that the duchy's cherished autonomy was always watched by the French crown. This fortress palace stands as the physical heart of Brittany's long journey for identity, a place where the last independent duchess walked, governed, and worked to preserve her heritage. The castle's very structure captures a pivotal moment when the nature of power was transforming, and the most enduring stronghold was one that could command respect through both its unyielding walls and its enlightened court. Their new home was an island of rock and resolve, a final bastion for an order with nowhere left to retreat. After their departure from the Holy Land, the Knights of St. John transformed the entire island of Rhodes into a single, integrated fortress, a declaration that their mission would endure against the rising power of the Ottoman Empire. This was not merely a castle, it was a sovereign state defended by the most advanced military architecture of its time. The knights understood that their survival depended on staying ahead of the relentless progress in siege technology, particularly the growing power of gunpowder artillery. They embarked on a continuous, decades-long program of fortification, thickening walls, lowering towers to present a less exposed target, and constructing immense, angled bastions designed to provide overlapping fields of fire for their own cannons. The entire city of Rhodes was encircled by these massive, earth-filled walls, a circuit of stone that could absorb the impact of heavy shot and redirect the force of an assault. How do you defend an island when the entire world seems to be shifting around you? You build a defense in depth, where every gate is a fortress, every curtain wall a carefully calculated shield. The knights turned their capital into a labyrinth of defensive lines, ensuring that even if one section was breached, attackers would find themselves funneled into exposed zones, caught by fire from secondary positions. The ultimate test of this formidable preparation came in 1522, when an immense Ottoman force arrived to claim the island. The siege that followed was one of the most significant and hard-fought of the era. a 6-month-long confrontation that pushed both defenders and attackers to their absolute limits. The knights and the people of Rhodes withstood constant bombardment, underground mining attempts, and repeated direct assaults, their layered defenses proving their worth day after day. The final outcome, a negotiated surrender that allowed the knights to depart with honor, marked the conclusive end of their presence in the eastern Mediterranean. This chapter closed not with a sudden collapse, but with a dignified withdrawal, a testament to a defense so resilient that it could only be overcome through immense and prolonged effort. The Castle of the Knights in Rhodes stands as a powerful monument to adaptation in the face of overwhelming change, a final, glorious stand that would ultimately lead to a new beginning on another island fortress far to the west. Its halls witnessed the moment Europe first glimpsed a new world. The Castle of the Counts of Barcelona is not a solitary fortress on a hill, but the very heart of a thriving city, a complex of palaces and courtyards woven into the urban fabric. This was the seat of the Counts of Barcelona, rulers who also wore the crown of Aragon, governing a sprawling maritime empire from this central point. Its story begins not in the medieval era, but with the Romans, whose defensive walls formed the first layer of this site's long history. The castle grew and transformed alongside the city, its architecture evolving from a simple fort into a magnificent royal residence, mirroring Barcelona's own journey from a provincial town to a capital of global commerce. Within these walls, the political and economic threads of the Mediterranean were drawn together. The Grand Salo del Tinel, a hall of immense proportions with its iconic, soaring arches, was more than a throne room. It was a stage for the empire's most defining moments. It was here, before the counts and queens, that Christopher Columbus stood upon his return from his historic voyage, presenting the wonders and evidence of a continent previously unknown to Europe. This single event forever tied the destiny of the Americas to the ambitions nurtured within this palace. The castle functioned as the administrative engine of a powerful confederation, its chambers buzzing with officials managing territories from Valencia to Naples and Sicily. This urban palace fortress demonstrates a different kind of power, one deeply integrated with the life of its city. It was not a symbol of separation, but of connection, anchoring the identity of a commercial and political powerhouse whose influence reached across the sea. How does a castle rule an empire? Not from a remote cliff, but from the bustling center of its greatest port, where the wealth of the world flows directly to its gates. Its grand palace was the final, brilliant jewel in Rhodes' defensive crown. The Palace of the Grand Master stood as the ultimate expression of the knightly order's identity, a command center where military strategy and spiritual devotion met beneath vaulted ceilings of immense scale. This was more than a residence, it was a carefully curated statement of power and piety, designed to overawe every visitor who passed through its fortified gates. The wealth flowing from their vast estates and maritime trade was poured into its construction, creating an interior of stunning opulence. Lavish mosaic floors depicted scenes from mythology, while walls were adorned with rich tapestries and finely carved stone, all intended to broadcast the order's sophistication and unshakable authority. Yet for all its beauty, this was a palace built for readiness. Its own defenses formed a final, inner stronghold within the already formidable city walls, a last redoubt where the knights could make a final stand if the outer defenses fell. This duality of luxurious living and constant vigilance defined their entire mission. The palace embodied a chivalric ideal that was both romantic and deeply poignant, a beacon of faith that persisted long after the crusading era had faded. Its transition to Ottoman forces in 1522 was not a sudden collapse but the conclusion of a 6-month event that tested the limits of human endurance. That moment marked the end of an epoch, forcing the knights to leave their island home and embark on a search for a new sanctuary. Yet in their departure, they carried with them the same indomitable spirit that had built this palace, a resilience that would soon find expression on a new fortress island, Malta, where their story would continue. This final chapter at Rhodes cemented the castle's place in lore, not as a monument to an ending, but as a lasting symbol of an order that refused to vanish from the world. Its thick walls were designed to withstand a rebellion, not to house the quiet contemplation of art. The castle of the Sforzas in Milan began its life as a statement of raw control, a formidable Visconti stronghold that Francesco Sforza seized and completely transformed in the 15th century. He did not just occupy the fortress, he rebuilt it into a personal declaration of a new dynasty, pouring the latest military science into its design. The soaring, rounded towers you see were not just for show, they were a direct and intelligent response to the growing power of artillery, their curved surfaces expertly engineered to deflect the impact of cannonballs. This was a fortress built for a new age, intended to make any challenge to Sforza rule a costly and likely feudal endeavor. It grew into one of the largest fortified complexes in all of Europe, its sheer scale a constant physical reminder of the family's immense influence over one of the continent's wealthiest cities. Yet the story of this castle is one of remarkable transformation. How does a symbol of martial power become a sanctuary for humanity's greatest creative achievements? The answer lies in a shift in purpose that saved the fortress from the decay that claimed so many others. Instead of falling into ruin, the castle was meticulously restored and reborn as a vibrant museum complex, a house of culture for the entire city. Within its secure halls, once reserved for garrisons and arms, now reside priceless treasures, including Michelangelo's final, deeply moving sculpture, the Rondinini Pieta. This profound journey from a tool of singular authority to a beacon of shared cultural heritage offers a powerful and hopeful conclusion to our exploration. It suggests that the ultimate legacy of these great stone giants is not found in the battles they won, but in the meaning we choose to give them long after the echoes of earlier times have faded. The journey from a simple earthen mound to a sprawling star fortress reveals an unending arms race set in stone. Each of these 30 castles represents a specific answer to a pressing question of its time. How do you stop a determined knight on horseback? The early Mont and Bailey, with its wooden tower and surrounding enclosure, offered a basic solution. How do you withstand a prolonged siege by a crusading army? The concentric walls of Krak des Chevaliers provided a devastatingly effective reply, and when the thunder of cannon began to shake the very foundations of power, the low, sloped bastions of Suomenlinna and the Castle of Good Hope emerged as the necessary evolution. The rounded towers of Château Gaillard were not an aesthetic whim. They were a direct and intelligent response to the smashing force of the trebuchet, designed to deflect projectiles instead of absorbing their full impact. The wide moats of Bodiam and the sheer cliffs of Dunnottar were not just barriers, they were force multipliers, turning the landscape itself into a weapon. This was a process of constant learning where a weakness exposed at one fortress, like the forgotten passage at Château Gaillard, would be studied and eliminated in the next. The primary driver was always a clear and present challenge, whether it was the ambition of a neighboring king, the fervor of a religious campaign, or the slow, steady advance of gunpowder technology. To stand still was to risk everything, and so the designs grew more complex, the walls grew thicker, and the thinking grew more cunning with each passing generation. Seeing this grand progression allows us to read these stone giants not as isolated monuments, but as chapters in a single, epic story of human ingenuity under pressure. Every curved wall and carefully placed opening tells a tale of a problem faced and a solution carved into the earth. What does this relentless pursuit of perfect defense ultimately tell us about the world these castles were built to influence, and the lasting legacy they left upon the lands they were meant to oversee? From the soaring heights of Château Gaillard to the brilliant geometry of Beaumaris, these 30 castles were far more than royal homes. They were the engines of medieval politics, the shields of emerging nations, and the workshops of pure military genius. Each stone was placed not just for shelter, but to actively reshape the world, pushing the very limits of defense and projecting a form of influence that would ultimately draw the borders and forge the cultures of Europe and beyond. Their quiet stones hold timeless lessons in strategy, the mindset of power, and the sheer scale of human ambition, ideas that resonate in our own modern world. As you look around at the cityscapes and institutions of today, consider what structures serve a similar purpose, projecting authority and ensuring security in our own time. The principles remain, even if the stone has been replaced by steel and glass. If this journey through the records of defensive history has sparked your curiosity, we invite you to subscribe for more deep explorations into the past. And we would love to hear from you. Which of these incredible fortresses captured your imagination the most? Share your favorite castle from the list in the comments below.